If you can't handle my ex, maybe we should break up, my boyfriend said. He never expected me to accept the dream job I'd turned down twice for him. My name is Claire Bennett. I was 31 when my boyfriend looked me in the eye and said that if I couldn't handle him spending every weekend with his ex-girlfriend, maybe we weren't right for each other. I agreed. Then I accepted the Singapore transfer I'd already turned down twice for him. Ethan Carter and I had been together for 3 years. Although he'd practically lived in my apartment for the past year, everything was still in my name. The lease, the utilities, even the insurance. His official address remained his mother's house because changing it was, according to him, too much paperwork. At the time, I dismissed it as laziness. Later, it would make leaving much easier. Before Olivia Hayes returned, our relationship felt stable. We weren't perfect, but we had routines that made me believe we were building a future together. That changed the day Ethan casually mentioned his college ex had moved back. Olivia who? I asked. My ex, we dated for maybe 2 months. It wasn't serious. I wanted to believe him. The following weekend, he told me Olivia had invited him to a poetry group. You hate poetry. I don't hate it. You called it emotional homework. He laughed, kissed my forehead and said she had just moved back, her mother was ill, and he only wanted to support an old friend. That one visit quietly became a routine. Before long, Saturdays turned into Sunday coffee, Friday game nights, and weekends that belonged to Olivia instead of us. I ate dinner alone more often than not, leaving Ethan's meals in the microwave while waiting for him long after midnight. Whenever I asked about the poetry club, he offered the same vague answers. What did you read? Different things. Who was there? The usual people. I never found out who those usual people were. 3 weeks before we broke up, my company offered me the opportunity of a lifetime, leading the Singapore office with a $140,000 salary, full relocation, company housing for a year, and the chance to build my own regional team. My manager slid the offer across the desk with a smile. You earned this, Claire. I already knew I wanted it. Then I thought about Ethan. That evening I told him over dinner. He barely looked up before refusing. My life is here. So is mine. I didn't answer. I declined the offer. When my boss urged me to reconsider 2 days later, Ethan still wouldn't budge, so I turned it down again. The following Saturday, Ethan got ready as though he were going on a date, wearing a new shirt, the cologne I'd given him, and carrying his overnight bag. For poetry club? I asked. He sighed before I even finished speaking. Could you stay this weekend? We haven't spent time together in weeks. Olivia's having a rough time. She has you every weekend. That's not fair. Neither is scheduling time with my own boyfriend around his ex. He insisted Olivia was just a friend, but when I asked why she always came first, he avoided the question. Are you staying there again? We might watch a movie. Just the two of you? His patience disappeared. God, Claire, you're being paranoid. For months, he'd used that word whenever I questioned what was happening right in front of me. Then he quietly ended our relationship without realizing it. If you can't handle me spending weekends with my ex, maybe we're not right for each other. Instead of arguing, I walked into the bedroom, opened my laptop, and replied to my manager's email. I accept the Singapore position. I can begin in 2 weeks. Ethan stared at the screen in disbelief. You're accepting an overseas job because we argued? No, I'm accepting the opportunity I never should have sacrificed. You can't throw away 3 years. You just told me we shouldn't be together. I was frustrated. Then stop making threats you expect me to be afraid of. He stood there for a moment before grabbing his bag. You'll regret this. The door slammed behind him. 20 minutes later, the messages started. Babe, let's talk. I'll stop seeing Olivia. This is childish. I ignored every one of them and began packing. Later that night, Ethan posted a photo from Olivia's apartment. 2 wine glasses sat on the coffee table, and the edge of a woman's bare knee appeared in the corner of the frame beneath the caption. When life throws curveballs at 2 a.m. I didn't need another explanation. I hadn't spent a second wondering where to go after leaving me because he'd already decided long before that day. Standing beside my suitcase, I realized our relationship hadn't ended that morning. It had been slipping away weekend after weekend for months. The next morning, I woke to 23 unread messages, half from Ethan and the rest from mutual friends asking whether the breakup rumors were true. I ignored them all. Around noon, my manager called. So, you've really accepted Singapore? Yes. I was beginning to think we'd never convince you. I almost convinced myself I didn't want it. When can you start? 2 weeks. Perfect. HR is already preparing everything. When the call ended, I stood quietly by the window. The promotion hadn't suddenly become more appealing. I'd simply stopped giving it up for someone who no longer deserved that sacrifice. That afternoon, Ethan finally called instead of texting. So that's it? He asked. You've really made your decision? I made it after listening to yours. You know I didn't mean what I said. You still said it. After a long silence, he changed tactics. I'll stop seeing Olivia. I never asked you to stop seeing her, I replied. I asked you to stop making me feel like I always came second. You never did. I looked around the apartment at the cold coffee mugs, the untouched dinners, and the movie tickets we'd never used because Olivia needed a friend. I think we both know that's not true. So you're really choosing Singapore over us? I shook my head. No, Ethan. I'm choosing myself. Before he could answer, I ended the call. Packing became unexpectedly therapeutic. Every drawer I emptied reminded me how much of my life I'd put on hold, waiting for someone else to choose me. The movers would handle the furniture. I only packed my clothes, documents, photographs, and the few things that truly mattered. By the time I finished, the apartment felt lighter. 3 days later, Tara texted. Tara, did you two really break up? Me, ask Ethan, I replied almost immediately. Tara, he says you accepted some crazy overseas job because you're having a breakdown. He also says you'll never leave because you're too attached to your family. I laughed. My parents lived across the country. My sister was in California, and some years I only saw her once. Ethan knew I hadn't turned down Singapore because of family. I turned it down because of him. The following evening, my doorbell rang. The security camera showed Ethan standing outside with his overnight bag. I know you're home. Instead of opening the door, I texted him. Me, your things are packed. They're outside the storage room downstairs. Pick them up whenever you want. A loud knock followed. You changed the locks? Yes. You can't do that. I already did. This is my home. No, the lease, utilities, insurance, and every payment are in my name. Your official address is still your mother's house. He fell silent. You packed everything? Yes. This is unbelievable. Zoa's Poetry Club. He stared at the door for another moment before picking up the first box and leaving without another word. That night, Ethan posted on social media. Sometimes people choose money over love. The comments quickly filled with sympathy, but before I could ignore it, Liam called. I overheard Olivia outside the gym today, he said. She told someone, Claire's basically out of the picture now, and I've got screenshots you need to see. 10 minutes later, they arrived. The screenshots came from Olivia's gym group chat. 2 months earlier, she had written, this girl I'm seeing is hilarious. Her boyfriend still thinks Ethan and I are doing poetry club. Another member replied, does he actually believe that? Olivia answered, apparently. Then another message caught my eye. Daniel's visiting next weekend, so Ethan and I have to skip Saturday. I called Liam immediately. Who's Daniel? Her boyfriend. They've been together for over a year. I leaned against the kitchen counter. So Olivia has a boyfriend, while Ethan spends every weekend with her. Looks that way. Neither of us spoke for a moment. I'm sorry, Claire, Liam finally said. So am I. I forwarded every screenshot to Ethan with a single word. Curious. Less than a minute later, he started calling. I declined the first call, then the second, the third, and everyone after that. By midnight, he'd called 15 times and filled my phone with messages insisting Olivia was joking and begging for a chance to explain. I never replied. Instead, I opened my email. My flight to Singapore was confirmed for Saturday at 4:12 p.m. Almost the exact time Ethan usually left to spend another weekend with Olivia. For once, we'd both be keeping different plans. Friday passed in a blur of paperwork, relocation documents, and movers clearing out the apartment until only a single suitcase remained by the front door. Everything I wanted to carry into my future fit inside it. The next morning, the doorbell rang again. This time Ethan had brought his mother Karen and his older sister Lauren. When I opened the door, Karen offered a careful smile. We just want to talk. You have 5 minutes. Karen explained that Ethan believed I'd accepted the overseas job because I was overwhelmed and acting emotionally. I looked at him. So that's the story. He avoided my eyes. I didn't want them to worry. You told them I was having a breakdown. I said you've been under pressure. Lauren frowned. You accepted a job on the other side of the world after one argument? It wasn't one argument, I said. It was 6 months of being told I was imagining what was happening right in front of me. Karen sighed. Relationships go through difficult seasons. You don't throw away 3 years over one friendship. I met Karen's gaze. If this had only been one friendship, none of us would be standing here. Ethan let out an impatient sigh. See, she's obsessed with Olivia. I shook my head. I'm not obsessed with Olivia. I'm exhausted by constantly coming second. Lauren frowned. Ethan said Olivia was just someone he dated briefly years ago. She is. That's never been the problem. Then what is? The fact that every weekend belonged to her. The room fell quiet as I continued. I asked Ethan to have lunch with me. He chose Olivia. I asked him to spend one weekend with me. He chose Olivia. I turned down the biggest promotion of my career because of us, and he still chose Olivia. Karen slowly turned toward her son. Is that true? Mom, she's making it sound worse than it was. No, I said evenly. I'm describing exactly what happened. Lauren looked back at Ethan. You spent every weekend with your ex for 3 months? We're friends. Friends usually don't lie about where they're going. I never lied. I held his gaze. Then tell us, who else was at poetry club? What poems did you read? What was the group's name? He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Not a single answer. Karen's expression changed. She had arrived believing she was defending her son. Now she looked as though she barely recognized him. Ethan, she asked quietly, was there ever a poetry club? His silence was answer enough. Lauren frowned. You told us 15 people met every Saturday. It wasn't always organized, he muttered. I walked to the table, picked up my phone, and opened the screenshots Liam had sent. Read these? Karen took the phone first. As she scrolled through the messages, the color drained from her face. Lauren leaned over her shoulder, reading in silence until one name caught her attention. Who's Daniel? It says Olivia couldn't meet Ethan because Daniel was visiting, Karen said quietly. And Daniel is her boyfriend. Ethan stared at the screen. What? I didn't know she had a boyfriend. For the first time that morning, I believed him. The shock on his face looked genuine, which meant Olivia hadn't been honest with him either. Karen lowered the phone slowly. So both of you were hiding this from your partners? It wasn't like that, Ethan said. Then explain what it was like, I replied. I couldn't. Lauren finally broke the silence. You made Claire believe she was the problem. You called her paranoid, then told her maybe the relationship should end if she couldn't accept your weekends with Olivia. I didn't mean it. I know, I said calmly. You just never believed I'd actually leave. I looked down without answering. That silence told me everything. I hadn't expected me to choose myself. Karen stepped forward and gently squeezed my hand. I'm sorry, I should have asked more questions before coming here. It's okay. No, it isn't. She turned to Ethan. You owe her a real apology. I'm sorry, he said. The words sounded automatic. I shook my head. You're sorry I'm leaving. You're not sorry for giving me a reason. Lauren picked up her purse. We should go. As they reached the door, Ethan stopped. If I block Olivia, if I stop seeing her, if I start therapy, will you stay? I looked at him for a long moment before asking quietly, why didn't any of those ideas matter until after I accepted Singapore? He searched for an answer. None came. I closed the door. That afternoon, I posted a single photo of my suitcase beside the airport terminal window with the caption, New Chapter, Singapore Bound. Within minutes, my phone filled with notifications. Wait, you're really leaving? Congratulations. Didn't Ethan say you weren't going anywhere? I smiled as I walked through airport security, realizing that even now, people were accepting the truth faster than Ethan was. Just before boarding, my phone buzzed. Ethan, what's your weekend like? Can we please talk? Instead of answering, I took a selfie beneath the departure gate where the screen behind me read Singapore, boarding soon, and sent it without a word. His reply came almost instantly. This isn't funny. I'm not joking. A few seconds later, another message appeared. You're really leaving? I looked through the terminal windows at the aircraft waiting on the runway before sending one final reply. You spent 3 months choosing someone else. Today I'm choosing myself. His typing bubble appeared immediately, but the boarding announcement cut him off. I switched my phone to airplane mode and never read another message. As the plane climbed above the clouds, I believed I was finally leaving Ethan behind. I was wrong. Singapore became the fresh start I'd been denying myself. My apartment overlooked Marina Bay. My team welcomed me from the first day. And every evening I went home thinking about tomorrow's work instead of wondering where Ethan was or why he hadn't come home. Looking back, I couldn't believe I'd turned down the promotion twice for someone who had never made me his first choice. 2 weeks later, Tara sent me a screenshot. Have you seen this? Ethan had posted, some people throw away 3 years together for a bigger paycheck. I tried to fix things. She chose money. For a few hours, people sympathized with him. Then the question started. Didn't Claire reject Singapore twice because of you? Weren't you spending every weekend with Olivia? Why were you two together at 2 a.m? The comment with the most reactions simply read, funny how she only chose money after you chose someone else. Within hours, Ethan deleted the post. 3 days later, I received a message from someone I'd never met. Hi Claire, I'm Olivia's boyfriend, or I guess I was. Would you be willing to talk? That evening, Daniel and I spoke over video. He admitted Olivia had spent months telling him I was jealous and obsessed with Ethan, but nothing about her explanations had ever felt right. I told him everything. The fake poetry club, Ethan disappearing every weekend, Liam overhearing Olivia, and the screenshots from the gym group chat. Daniel listened without interrupting. When I finished, he sighed. I kept wondering why she was suddenly busy every Saturday. Before we ended the call, he sent me screenshots from his own conversations with Olivia. One message read, Ethan's girlfriend works all the time. She never notices anything. He only stays because she's comfortable. Another said, Claire thinks we're reading poetry every weekend. She's actually making it easy. For months, they hadn't just lied to me. They'd been laughing at me. Daniel apologized for not seeing the truth sooner. So should Ethan, I replied. The fallout came quickly. Daniel ended the relationship and posted the screenshots without adding a single comment. The evidence spoke for itself. Friends quickly understood what had happened, while Ethan and Olivia immediately began blaming each other. Watching them argue brought no satisfaction. It simply confirmed how easily they'd worked together while convincing me I was the problem. A month later, just when I believed my old life had finally stayed behind, my receptionist called. Claire, there's a man downstairs asking for you. I don't have any meetings. He says his name is Ethan. From my office window, I spotted him immediately. Security had already stopped him at the entrance, but 4 hours later when I left for lunch, he was still waiting with the same overnight bag he'd carried out of my apartment. I flew 9,000 miles, he said quietly. Please, just one coffee. I agreed only because the cafe across the street was crowded, bright, and impossible to have a private conversation in. Ethan looked exhausted. I've made a mess of everything. You have. I blocked Olivia. I started therapy. I haven't spoken to her in weeks. I hope therapy helps. He searched my face. That's all you're going to say? What were you expecting? After a long silence, he finally admitted what I'd known all along. I honestly believed you'd never leave. No matter what happened, I thought you'd always be there. At that moment, everything became clear. In that moment, I finally understood him. He hadn't believed I'd forgive him again. He'd simply never imagined I'd leave. I thought I could keep both relationships, he said quietly. The excitement with Olivia and the stability with you. I looked at him for a long moment. There was nothing left to ask, nothing left to fix. I stood. I hope therapy helps you become a better man. He opened his mouth as though he wanted to stop me. Instead, he only whispered, I'm sorry. I nodded once. I believe you. Then I walked out of the cafe without looking back. Nearly 2 months passed without hearing Ethan's name, not because he had disappeared, but because I finally stopped looking for him. Singapore filled every corner of my life with new routines, new responsibilities, and people who valued my work instead of taking my loyalty for granted. Some evenings I'd catch my reflection in the office windows and realize I no longer looked exhausted. One afternoon, Tara called. You won't believe what Ethan's doing. What now? He's already dating someone, a yoga instructor. I laughed softly. That didn't take long. He keeps posting quotes about healing. Good for him. She was quiet for a moment before asking, You really don't care anymore, do you? I looked out across Marina Bay, where the evening light shimmered on the water. I spent 3 years caring. I think that's enough. Few days later, a LinkedIn notification appeared. Olivia Hayes wants to connect. Curiosity got the better of me. Congratulations on Singapore. Looks like we're living in the same city now. Before I could process it, another message arrived. I started a new job here last week. Out of all the cities in the world, we had somehow ended up in the same one. I declined the request without replying, convinced that would be the end of it. 3 days later, I walked into my apartment building carrying groceries just as the elevator doors opened. Olivia stepped out. She stopped short before forcing an awkward smile. So, I guess we're neighbors. What? My company arranged corporate housing. She pointed toward the elevators. I'm on the 12th floor. I lived on the 14th. For a brief moment, the coincidence felt almost absurd. She wasn't alone. Beside her stood a young man balancing 2 grocery bags. This is Ryan, she said brightly. He offered his hand. Nice to meet you. Before I could respond, Olivia added, Claire's an old friend. I met her eyes. We're not friends. Her smile vanished. Ryan looked from her to me, clearly confused. I'll see you upstairs, I said, stepping into the elevator before either of them could answer. As the doors closed, I hoped that would be the last uncomfortable encounter between us. It wasn't. The following evening, the residents' group chat erupted. More than 200 apartments shared the same online community, and my phone wouldn't stop buzzing after someone accidentally posted a private message meant for Olivia. The sender was Ryan. Olivia, I searched your name after yesterday. You're the Poetry Club cheater. Don't ever contact me again. For a few seconds, the chat fell silent. Then came the flood of reactions. People started asking what Poetry Club meant, while others quickly searched her name and began sharing screenshots before anyone could stop them. Within minutes, Ryan deleted the message. Too late. Someone had already captured the message and shared it throughout the residents' group before Ryan deleted it. By the next morning, nearly everyone in the building seemed to know exactly what Poetry Club meant. The next morning, as I walked past the front desk, I caught 2 security guards exchanging a quiet comment before both glanced toward the elevators and smiled. I didn't need to hear what they'd said. Olivia's reputation had crossed the world just as surely as she had. That weekend, my phone rang from an unfamiliar number. Hello? A familiar sigh answered first. Claire. Ethan. So, you know Olivia moved there. I've already met her. I still can't believe she ended up in your building. Neither can I. Silence settled between us before he let out a bitter laugh. Maybe karma really does exist. I said nothing. I finally understand what you went through. What changed? My yoga instructor. He paused. She kept telling me her ex was just a friend. Turns out they've been spending every weekend together. I closed my eyes. The same excuse. The same script. I confronted her, he continued, and she told me I was being insecure. For the first time, he wasn't asking for sympathy. He simply sounded tired. I finally know how you felt, he said quietly. I'm sorry, Claire. His apology was genuine, probably the first truly honest thing I'd heard from him in months. I believe you're sorry, I replied. You do? Yes, but understanding my pain doesn't erase the choices that caused it. I know. I hope you find peace, Ethan. You too. I ended the call first. I stood in my kitchen for another moment, staring at the silent phone. I expected relief or satisfaction, but neither came. Instead, I realized I was simply finished. Life settled into a rhythm after that, and ordinary turned out to be exactly what I'd been missing. I started running along Marina Bay before work, became a regular at a small neighborhood cafe, slept through the night, and eventually stopped checking my phone every few minutes. A few weeks later, our company hosted a networking event with several design firms. That's where I met Noah Foster, a 33-year-old Australian architectural designer who managed to spill sparkling water on his own jacket while reaching out to shake my hand. I swear, I'm usually more coordinated than this. I laughed. I'll pretend I didn't see it. Deal. For the next 20 minutes, we talked about architecture, travel, terrible airline food, and why Singapore somehow made every rooftop look cinematic. What stood out wasn't what Noah said, but what he didn't do. He never asked whether I was single, never tried to impress me, and never turned the conversation into a performance. It was simply easy, and I hadn't realized how much I'd missed that. When the event ended, he smiled and handed me his card. I really enjoyed talking with you. If you'd ever like to grab coffee, give me a call. He smiled as he slipped the card into my hand. For the first time in years, I couldn't remember the last person who'd shown me kindness without expecting something in return. As I watched him leave, my phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Ethan or Olivia. It was an email from Human Resources. Congratulations. Your 6-month performance review has been moved forward in recognition of your exceptional performance. 6 months earlier, I had almost given up this opportunity for a man who couldn't let go of his past. Now my future was finally rewarding me instead. The review exceeded every expectation. You've surpassed every target we set, my regional director said, closing the folder in front of him. You've done an outstanding job. I've had an incredible team. He smiled. You built that team. Then he slid another document across the table. We'd like you to stay. I looked down at the document. It confirmed my promotion to permanent regional director, along with another salary increase, long-term relocation support, and responsibility for leading projects across Southeast Asia. 6 months ago, I would have asked for time to think. This time I didn't hesitate. I accept. I thought you might, he said with a grin. Walking back to my office, I thought about the woman who had once turned down this very opportunity because her boyfriend refused to leave home. She no longer felt like me. That evening, Noah and I had dinner at a rooftop restaurant overlooking the bay. We'd been seeing each other for a couple of months, slowly enough that nothing ever felt forced. There were no games, no ultimatums, and no grand promises. Just easy conversations, mutual respect, and the quiet comfort of knowing neither of us had to pretend. Halfway through dinner, he looked at me thoughtfully. Can I ask you something? Of course. When we first met, you seemed like someone who was always waiting for bad news. I smiled. I probably was. And now, I watched the lights ripple across the water before answering. I don't wait anymore. He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. It was a small gesture, but somehow it meant more than every apology Ethan had ever given me. A week later, Tara called again. I've got updates. Which one do you want first? Ethan or Olivia? You choose. She laughed. Olivia. Ryan had ended things less than a month after moving into the building. Once he searched her name and found the Poetry Club screenshots, he couldn't ignore what she'd done. Her reputation had followed her across the world. And Ethan? Tara laughed even harder. Remember the yoga instructor? Maya? She dumped him. What happened? He caught her spending every weekend with her ex. I sighed. You're kidding. I wish I were. He confronted her, and she looked him straight in the eye and said, He's just a friend. You're being insecure. I couldn't help laughing. The exact same words. The funny part, Tara added, is Ethan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I hope he learned something. I think he finally did. About a month later, Daniel called with one last update. You remember Olivia's tax issue? I do. For years, she'd claimed her parents' address as her legal residence while actually living elsewhere to lower her taxes. The investigation's finished, he said. She owes a little over $20,000 after taxes, penalties, and interest. Is she okay? Her parents covered the bill, but they also made her move back home. I leaned back in my chair. Consequences had taken their time, but they'd arrived all the same. Before hanging up, Daniel hesitated. There's one more thing. What is it? If you hadn't told me the truth, I probably would have married her. I smiled. I'm just glad you found out before it was too late. So am I. That was the last time we spoke. Several weeks later, an international envelope appeared in my mailbox. The handwriting on the front belonged to Ethan. I almost threw it away unopened, but curiosity won. Inside was a single handwritten letter. Claire, I spent months blaming Olivia, then blaming you, and finally blaming bad timing. Therapy forced me to admit the truth I'd been avoiding. I spent months blaming everyone except myself. Therapy finally forced me to admit that I wanted your loyalty without earning it. By the time I understood what I'd lost, it was already too late. I folded the letter, slipped it back into the envelope, and placed it in a box with old paperwork. I slipped the letter back into the envelope and placed it in the same box as my old paperwork. I wasn't keeping it because it still mattered. I simply no longer felt the need to erase that chapter of my life. That chapter was over. The following Friday, Noah stopped by my office. You busy? When am I not? I grinned. I've got a proposal. I narrowed my eyes. Seeing my expression, he laughed. Relax, a vacation proposal. I'm saving the other one for another day. I rolled my eyes. Nice recovery. He pulled 2 boarding passes from his jacket. Bali, next weekend. When did you plan this? A few weeks ago. I wanted to wait until your performance review was over. I smiled. You're impossible. I'll take that as a yes. You should. The following Saturday, we arrived at Changi Airport. Exactly 6 months earlier, I'd stood in the same terminal with one suitcase, terrified I was making the biggest mistake of my life. This time, Noah walked beside me carrying our backpacks while travelers hurried toward their own departures. Just before we reached security, my phone vibrated. Unknown number. Claire, it's Ethan. I know you probably won't answer, but I deleted the message without opening the rest. Noah glanced over. Everything okay? I slipped my phone back into my pocket. It is now. He smiled. Ready? I looked toward our gate. 6 months earlier, I'd been afraid that leaving Ethan meant losing the future I'd imagined. Instead, leaving him had finally allowed me to build one worth living. I'm ready. We walked toward the gate together. This time, I never looked back. As our flight lifted above the clouds, I looked out the window and realized I'd spent 3 years fighting to keep someone who had already let me go. Choosing Singapore hadn't cost me the future I'd imagined. It had given me a better one. If I regret anything now, it's only that I didn't choose myself sooner.